Welcome back to the Suzuki main stage. Unfortunately, due to technical issues, we weren't able to speak to Natasha about her Atlantic crossing. So instead, I caught up with Shaun Priestley, foiling coach, to talk about foiling top tips and ways to develop your foiling skills. So welcome, Shaun. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
First of all, if you had one kind of top tip for someone who was a club level racer and they wanted to get into foiling, what would that be?
It would be to realise kind of how accessible foiling has become. So the initial top tip at that stage would be to have a look in detail at what there is out there, because there is the almost stigma involved with foiling, if you like, of complicated boats, high performance boats, expensive boats, and really quite difficult to sail. But it has evolved over time. It's really not like that now. So I'd suggest to just do a little bit of homework as the first top tip, to have a look at what's out there in terms of classes that are coming up, the new racing scene for the various boats, and the accessible training side, and the environments that are there to help get you up and foiling in a safe way. So the first top tip is to kind of not be scared of it, if you like, and to look at it in a little bit more detail to realise how accessible it is now.
And what kind of boats do you mean that are making it more accessible? Have you got any examples that you can give to us?
Yeah, well, I mean, the Moth itself, which has been kind of the centerline foiler that we've all admired for years and years and years, is there and is always trying to welcome people into the class. But in addition to that, now there's the Wasp, which has become really established as a racing class. There's the Skeeter, which is now building an international class. The Nicky, which is a junior foiler, which is pretty exciting. And then there's various other boats like the F101. As an example, the Foiling Dinghy is a new boat that's out. So that's just to name a few of boats that are not only available for people to purchase and to use, but they're also available in training centres to try first before reaching out and buying your own boat. So it's good to know that there's established classes that are showing up now. So there is a racing scene to get involved with, but also that there is this full range of kit, and it's accessible through centres as well as being able to purchase it yourself.
Yeah, I think the perception was not that long ago that you had to be young, super fit, and kind of a really experienced sailor to get into foiling. And it seems like now that there is a boat to cater for the junior sailors, the slightly older sailors, smaller sailors, heavier sailors. So there really does seem to be something for anyone. If you were going to get started, but you weren't confident that you could just buy a boat and get on the water, is there, what are the training courses that are available to people to get them and build their confidence?
Yeah, so there's been a lot of work actually put in from the RWA on a training scheme. So it's a 3-course scheme, and it runs at any RWA accredited training centre that runs the foiling scheme. So the Andrew Simpson centres do a lot of it, for example. But there is several, both in the UK and in like the international and the holiday companies. I'm aware that we can't travel at the moment, but in the future when we can again. So there's places both in the UK and abroad in warmer conditions where you can find these courses. And the first one is actually just a half-day course. So it's about getting out, just having the first experience of it, and having the first experience of the feeling of foiling, if you like. And then from there, you progress in more detail in the other 2 courses. So you have a little look at the systems, the theory behind how it all works, and to start getting a more comprehensive knowledge base on foiling as a whole. But the first one, which I'd recommend anyone to go and have a go, is literally just taking off, experiencing it, all in a safe training environment managed by a qualified instructor.
I think one of the things for me is that you kind of never forget the first time that you get foiling on a boat. It's a really special experience, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I have noticed that you're not able to straight away kind of take the boat out in all conditions. So what are the kind of ideal conditions for a beginner to learn to foil in?
In a natural world, if you could get 12 knots and flat water, then it's not too light and it's not too strong. So the thing is, you could think, oh, I'll go out in light winds, I'll make my life easy. But if the boat isn't wanting to lift out, and especially if you're on quite a narrow boat where the balance is important, that might make your life a little bit harder. So 12 knots, 12 to 15 in that sort of wind range. And then sea state, more than other sports, you really have to consider. So and certainly more than conventional sailing, the flatter the water, the easier it'll be.
So maybe kind of opens up more of our inland lakes and that kind of thing, where a lot of people learn to sail and then you almost sometimes graduate onto the sea. Actually, foiling might take you back to some of those places that began in the first place, and especially when you've got that safety factor of being surrounded by land all the way around. It's quite kind of a bit of a confidence booster knowing that you've got somewhere you're going to land if you end up capsized, that kind
Yeah.
of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's important you mention actually, because the only other thing to consider is water depth, because you've got like expensive foils underneath and everything like that. So on your inland lakes, it is great, flat water and the shore around you, but just also being conscious of depth when you're deciding a venue.
Yeah, definitely. And on that kind of safety factor, as with any time you're learning something new, a new boat, a new venue, anything like that, I guess there's a few more safety factors to consider. Is there any kind of gear that you'd recommend to help with that safety? Would you wear a helmet if you were going foiling?
Yeah, if in doubt, certainly, and you've got to really consider the boat that you're in. Some of the boats have standing rigging, some of the boats don't. Some of the boats can, if you get the foil set up completely wrong. Another reason why a course to learn this stuff is good. But if you get the setup wrong and you get the conditions wrong, you can make your environment more sketchy than it has to be, if you like. So if you end up with that, the boats can maybe pitch pole depending on the boat that you're in. So if you was learning in a moth, for example, I'd completely recommend a helmet, because if you find that you are pitch poling or diving and you're going forwards, then it's worth wearing it. But there is other boats there where it's arguable that you wouldn't need it necessarily. There's also impact clothing that some sailors wear just in case, but that isn't to put people off. That's if you are going to go out in full-on conditions. And certainly if you find yourself going out in fruity conditions to start with, or you're tempted to do it, I'd certainly recommend some safety equipment. It comes back to knowing your kit and knowing the environment while you're making those calls.
Yeah, definitely. That makes a lot of sense to me. And I kind of mentioned earlier, I've just got myself a wasp and I'm learning to sail that at the moment.
Awesome.
And through learning to sail loads of different boats, quite often, if you've done a fair amount of sailing, you're able to jump in, get the boat around the course. And then after that, you're trying to hone your racing skills. But I've noticed really with foiling sailing, it does take a couple of hours, a couple of days, long sessions trying to just be able to learn how to tack and jibe the boats. Have you got any tips for people who are able to get up and going in a straight line, but they're maybe struggling with their first jibe, for example?
Yeah, I mean, this is really common when you work with people that come from a high level background or do a lot of sailing or a lot of sailing all the time, and they want to get there really, really quickly. One of the biggest tips, I suppose, with jibing and things like that is in terms of the entry and the setup, and that's going to get a little bit easier the more comfortable you are. So you might feel that you're comfortable going downwind really, really quickly, and therefore start thinking about sending it into jibes. But the recommendation would be to make sure you're really happy with the downwind sailing, so happy that you can start to think about moving across the boat and getting set up without disturbing the physics of what's going on at that point. So it's having enough feel for the boat that when you bring your weight in, for example, to transfer the tiller over, you're not just going to heel straight over to leeward and crash, which is something that you might commonly see from an experienced sailor who is sending it around and foiling straight away and think, oh, I can do this, I'm going to go for a jibe, but they've rushed into it, if you like. So it's not to rush, and it's just to develop that feel before you do it, and that'll make the process of the turn a lot easier to comprehend, like each stage of it. But effectively, you're looking there at trying to get the boat flat, if not a tiny bit of leeward heel, and trying to get the tiller over and fixed so you don't oversteer. And if you can get to that sort of phase and be aware that you are going to be switching sides a lot sooner than you would expect to do, then the next bit can become a lot easier. And it's just about feeling for the balance point and when you should switch the weight. The earlier the better usually, and how you can steer out the exit. But if you try and do all that stuff too soon before you're fully comfortable with what you're doing in terms of just foiling, then you can make your life a little bit harder, and you can get a little bit frustrated a little bit sooner, if you like, than just taking your time with it.
It definitely requires some coordination, doesn't it? Being able to move your body independently of moving the tiller or the main sheet.
Yeah, and one of the big things, obviously, is that you're no longer pushing that hull through the water. So the boat's up in the air and going really quickly. The smallest tiller movement does a lot more than you're expecting, and that often catches people out. Why you see bungee strapped around the tillers at the back. So when you are doing these small things, hopefully you're not accidentally oversteering the boat. Because the more you do steer in those moments, you'll realise the boat turns very, very quickly. So just getting a handle on that, really.
Yeah, definitely. So once you've decided that foiling's what you want to get into and eventually you want to go racing, how long do you think it typically takes for someone to get their boat and then get to a level where they're able to get themselves around a course in a competitive way?
So yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, what we did with the RA training scheme was to try and put that into a time frame, if you like. It came out in 3 courses. So it was that beginner course, the first flights course, the sustained flights course, which is in the middle, where you learn a little bit more about the equipment that you're using and try and gain the feel of going up and down and just what you're working to. There's also some theory in there on the physics of it all and how the writing moment becomes very important. And then on the third course, it's more to look at the details of how you can go upwind and downwind really effectively and consider doing things like a jibe. So we were hoping that that training scheme would give you the sort of time frame, if you like, to go from not being able to foil to be at the point that maybe you can go up and down. You can't quite get through your turns, but you can get close to it. And if you're at that point, I think it's time that you can get around the course. So, I mean, you can either get there through structured tuition like that. I'd certainly recommend if you're looking at this from club sailing or conventional sailing, and you're thinking about getting into foiling, that certainly those first 2 courses can help you fast forward to a level without having to make a lot of mistakes and learn the hard way, if you like. And then from there, it's just simple time in the water. If the conditions are good, you'll accelerate quickly. And if you can get to that point that you're going upwind and downwind quite happy and you understand the different angles that you might have to create on the foils to help you go up and down depending on the boat that you're in, then you're ready to start going around the course. And I don't know what the WASP class are doing these days, but I think when they started by doing stuff like a bit of training as well as racing on their weekends. And it's something that the Skeeter and the Nicky are doing now. They're doing like a 1-day training and a 1-day racing just to help people get there, because one of the biggest things that we all have to realize, as you said earlier, it's not quite the same as jumping from displacement boat to a displacement boat or planing boat to planing boat. As soon as the boat's lifting, the physics are different and you're working off a balance point on the foil. So in a way, it's almost like learning a new sport because it's that different. So it's getting used to that different balance point, the techniques needed to keep you on the foil. And I think the sort of classes that are running the racing for people that are new to it are aware of that, and they're trying to facilitate that with a bit of training alongside the racing, if that makes sense. So in terms of a time frame, there's the scheme or any sort of structured time in a safe environment. But hopefully, after a few weekends, you can get yourself up and downwind and then start thinking about getting around the course.
Yeah, obviously it's difficult at the moment with all the restrictions that are in place, but hopefully it won't be too long before we can have some kind of organized training and people can get back out on the water and improve their skills. Something I think is really cool with foiling boats, any kind of fast boats at the moment, with the development of the GPS technology, is that you don't necessarily have to sail a windward leeward race course to have a race, be competitive. Do you think that there'll be more of an emphasis on competitions, people's top speeds, 10-second average top speeds, things like that? Can you see the sport going that way with these foiling boats?
Well, I think a really cool element to the foiling is it's not always about the racing. Like, it's just really a cool thing to see people out loving sailing and just going fast and flying above the water, and having a fascination with that process to start with is almost like just really great to see. Because quite often you might see sailors try and get their adrenaline fix out of other sports like kite surfing, windsurfing, or mountain biking even. So to have that within, sort of even single-handed sailing or other sailing, to be foiling and be fascinated with the idea that you're just going fast, you're flying above the water, it's all completely different. As a general point, I think that's really cool. And then absolutely, you see people, I think it's Beat Racing and the Sail Racer app that are out there, where you can then get to a point that you're recording your time, and you could race anyone in the world in theory if the conditions are the same, or you can work off your own time, try and beat it next time. So I think they're all really exciting developments, and as the foiling boats themselves are all about development, and this side of thing is developing, I can certainly see it going together. And like I said, it's just great that people can be loving it up until the point that they're racing, whether it's using these apps or just going out sailing for themselves, free sailing, because generally what we see, most of the sailors that get involved are just sort of fascinated by the process of learning to foil itself. And then when they get a little bit bored of that, they're learning the next bit and the handling, and then they get to a point that they're so comfortable with it that they'll be ready to race one another in the boat. So I think that because it is so new and there's so much development in it, the excitement behind the process, and then linking that with apps, and hopefully one day going racing at the end, that the whole thing's fun, not just the racing.
Yeah, I think definitely for me, the enjoyment of just going sailing has been really reignited. It's so rewarding to get foiling and then have the challenge of the maneuvers and achieving that. So I'm really looking forward to going back out there and kind of improving my skills and eventually getting on the race course. I'm not sure I'm quite there yet, but hopefully it won't be too long.
Yeah.
In terms of kind of the racing strategy and tactics, if you've learned your racing skills in a displacement boat or a planing boat, how do you see them differing if you're racing either handicap racing or one design, say for example the Wasp class? How do you see that differing to displacement boat racing?
I think a lot of it is about to become about how long you can stay in the air for. So can you get through the maneuvers, and if you get to the point that a lot of people can do that, then you could be having a discussion with someone in the top of the moth fleet maybe about how they find who can make the gains. But I think where we're talking about the grassroots and into entry level racing, it'll be about who can stay in the air for the longest and keep the boat foiling. So can you get through a tack? Can you get through a jibe? And do you have an advanced level of control over the boat so you can control it to get off the start line at full flight? I think once all that comes together and your flight time is up, then you can start to think a little bit harder about how you can make tactical gains, if you like, because you can decide, if I want to tack now, I can tack without coming off the foil, kind of thing. So I think initially the sort of staying in the air is the important thing, and then progressing from there as the fleet progresses. But it'd be interesting to see from the Wasp class now, because there's a lot of people that seem to be able to stay on the foil around the whole course the whole time, and that's obviously come a long way since it first started and it first came out as the original sort of user-friendly foiling boat. So it'll be really good to watch the racing in that class over the next year or two, because there's been people that have been in it for some time now and are at that level.
If you were a club who was running racing for a lot of different kinds of boats, and you had some foiling boats that wanted to join in, do you have to set a different course for them, or are you able to kind of join all the classes together and just have the foiling boats go around obviously a little bit faster than the other boats?
Sure, I think that depends. I mean, the foiling boats do enter, like long distance races and races alongside of the boats on handicap basis. But the thing is, there is a few big venues like Weymouth and Rutland and various others that are experienced in running these regattas. I think it's just important to know the sort of limitations on foiling boats. So things like water depth, wind strength, and distance that you might need. Generally speaking, a windward leeward would be more appropriate, because it's quite hard to sail them depending on the strength on the reaches and to get control. So they'd quite enjoy windward leeward courses where they can go from upwind to downwind, plenty of depth. And there is experienced venues that are already doing it. So hopefully the more that these boats get into the sailing clubs, the more that people get used to having them on the water.
Yeah, and I guess for the sailors, it's about learning as well what kind of courses work for you and what don't. So I'm sure, as people get more experience, that knowledge will be more widespread across all of the clubs, and everyone can kind of enjoy racing together, which will be great.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the best ideally is straight windward leeward up and down with a leeward gate would be the sort of dream, if you like, for the foiling boats. But where possible to fit in with the handicap racing will just depend on what that course looks like and the exact conditions on the day, really.
Yeah, windward leeward's quite nice and easy to remember when you're doing however many knots upwind and downwind as well, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a couple of other aspects to the sport which are really progressing really quickly at the moment with wind foiling, so
Mm.
windsurfing foiling and wing foiling.
Yeah.
Um, do you run any kind of courses for them as well? If you were wanting to learn one or the other, is there a crossover between all of them?
Yeah, so the wind foiling scheme was actually created at the same time as the sail foiling scheme. So the windsurfing and the sailing all happened together. It was in 2017, if I remember correctly, and they did a pilot throughout 2018. And they both have identical courses, so first flights, sustained flights, and performance flights. So again, if you're looking to do it from a windsurfing point of view, then you can do it in a very similar format to the sailing at an RWA training centre. And then the wing foiling, I think everyone kind of noticed last year how accessible that is. And one of the interesting things about it is it seems like I wouldn't say easy. All this stuff is challenging, but it is a good accessible route into learning to foil on a board. So the RWA are looking at the moment and looking at creating a similar scheme for wing foiling. So hopefully in the not too distant future, when the world goes a little bit more back to normal, there might be an RWA wing foiling scheme out there so people can learn again in a safe training environment.
But it's amazing to see how all of these sports are progressing within sailing and water sports, and it's definitely the way that the sport's going. So it's great to kind of talk about it, get people excited about it, and hopefully people soon can get back out on the water and enjoy it for themselves.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's certainly not the no one's saying it's the entire future of sailing, foiling, but it's there as part of it. So and it adds that sort of inspiring new element to it. And we've noticed people that might be getting, I wouldn't say bored, but perhaps they've been doing the same thing for a long period of time. And foiling has added an extra bit of inspiration and an extra reason for them to get out on the water, and that's great to see. To be honest, so it's helping hopefully with a bit of retention in the sport and bringing people back that might have got, might be a little bit bored, if you like, of doing the same thing over and over again. So it adds that extra challenge.
That's great. Thank you so much for all of your insights into foiling. And I know that there's loads more coming from the RWA in terms of the courses, the training that they're offering. And I'm sure we're going to see the sport progress and develop further over the next few years. So thank you so much for your insight and for joining us today. And hopefully see you on the water very soon.
Yeah, thanks ever so much. Enjoy the rest of the show.
Thanks, Shaun, for all of those great tips, helping people to take their first flight or develop their foiling skills. There's a bit of a break now on the main stage, so don't forget to check out the exhibition halls, where loads of the exhibitors are on hand to answer any questions you might have. Join Mark Jardine of Yachts and Yachting back here on the Suzuki main stage at 3 o'clock for the Concours d'Elegance.